Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your reluctant prophet. You know, there are two basic types of liars. The more general type of liar, who might deliberately tell you it's not raining when it is. When confronted with them, we know it's best to check the weather for ourselves. But then there's the truly malignant, pathological species of liar who would steal your eyeballs, only to come back to help you look for them. This latter category defines the Canadian government under Justin Trudeau's premiership. But as I so often like to say, it's far worse than that. Since far too many misunderstand why Trudeau's government stole their eyes in the first place, and that when his government comes to help us look for them, it certainly isn't to restore our sight. Which is why you're banned from sharing news on social media. Welcome to the great age of unreason. More than anything, Canada, indeed most of the West, has come to accept that being governed by bulbous oculi thieves which rob us of our ability to see what is actually going on serves the public interest instead of the malignant, pathological liars orchestrating this vast deception. Read the following discussion I had this morning with yet another supporter of the state's propagation of lies on the Canada Freedom Coalition group on Facebook. This group is purportedly dedicated to liberty and right-wing politics. I had posted my vodcast and blog dedicated to Remembrance Day to it and asked, have we become so gutless that we will permit Hamas supporters to spread anti-Semitism and hate without exposing the lies behind them fomenting trouble here in Canada? Watch to discover the true story of the two-state solution and the infighting among Palestinians that block the peace process from being realized. I provide the link to my previous podcast. So I'm going to review the feed and its comments, particularly from, this one chap. From Neil A. Kilpatrick. Are you saying you're okay with bombing and murdering children and innocent civilians? Because that's what Israel is doing as I type this. Do you know this? Tit for tat doesn't bring peace. Violence begets violence always. I much prefer hear people promote peaceful solutions like a ceasefire than regurgitating tit-for-tat misinformation and thus perpetuating violence. I have posted his words as he wrote them without correcting his spelling. Okay, so if you're reading my blog, you'll see that there's misspellings. That's simply because I copied and pasted what he had written. I replied, can you imagine anyone telling the Ukrainians that they need to respond proportionally to the Russian invasion, since that invasion such that we would see massive protests in Canada calling the Ukrainians genocidal for defending themselves against Russian aggression? The Israeli military doesn't target women and children, while Hamas does. Hamas poses an extrinsic threat to Palestinians and Israelis alike. Until its ability to hide itself amongst civilians is literally eradicated, the threat it poses to civil order will never end. He responded to that remark. Your response is not related to what I said. It's just more tit for tat. Have you no care for people? Are you a robot or a human being, Bill Reimer? Seriously, are you a human or a bot? Because humans care about other humans. Again, I replied. Why we do not hear anything about the Red-Green Alliance, aka Islamo-Leftist Alliance, complaining about proportional response, since they have no interest in the Ukrainian-Russian war, because neither country falls into one of their categories of Western oppressors. Therefore, this war offers them no meat for their propaganda machine. As to ceasefire, Hamas has been offered a declared ceasefire by Israel 9 times since the beginning of the Oslo process. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was announced on May the 21st, 2021. The ceasefire was brokered by Egypt with mediation efforts from the U.S. and Qatar. It is Hamas who constantly reneges on the terms of ceasefire agreements, including the latest holocaustic, murderous rampage perpetrated by them on October the 7th. How did Hamas come to power? Hamas was elected in Palestinian authorities in 2006, and here I simply repeat some of the stuff from my last podcast. The election saw a political split between the secular Fatah, a branch of Palestinian Liberation Organization that dominated the PLO since the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, and the Islamist Hamas, which was formed in 1987 as an offshoot of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas won a bare plurality of votes, 44%, to the more moderate Fatah's party of 41%, but, given their electoral system, held a strong majority of seats, 74 to 45. Yet neither party was keen on sharing power. Fighting among them broke out between Fatah and Hamas. When a unity government was finally formed in June of 2007, Hamas broke the deal when it started murdering Fatah members and in the end took control of the Gaza Strip. Yet signs here in Ottawa are calling for Canadians to stand with Palestine to end the genocide when the Palestinians themselves elected Hamas and murder one another with impunity, even as Hamas hides behind Palestinian women and children. There have been reports of pro-Palestinian protests planned for November the 11th, 2023, Remembrance Day. However, these reports pertain to the United Kingdom. But given the fact that my local grocery store's parking lot are rife with signage full of disinformation, it is telling us that there will likely be trouble here as well. Those who weren't killed in the struggle between Hamas and Fatah fled to the West Bank, and the territories have remained split ever since. In other words, Hamas's absolute rule of Gaza is not what the Palestinians voted for in 2006. My question then is, why are they still supporting them? It is also important to note that the last election in Gaza occurred 17 years ago in 2006. It was misleading to conflate the electoral outcome with the views of the region, although I have serious doubts as to why Palestinian immigrants in Canada are screaming outrage on behalf of Hamas while echoing its anti-Semitic sentiments. Nevertheless, as of 2021, Ismail Haniyeh has been re-elected as leader of the Palestinian group Hamas. And those Hamas-sympathizing bastards in Parliament had the balls to accuse a freedom convoy, the very antithesis of Nazis, to be Nazis? The real Nazis have infiltrated cabinet and the executive branch of government, who allow anti-Semitism to be paraded in front of Parliament. The following is from Joe Warmington in the Toronto Sun. Article entitled "Canada is Starting to Look Like 1930s Germany" was published on the 5th of November this year. This was not Germany in the 1930s, but Canada on November 4th, 2023. In Ottawa this Saturday, there was a swastika outside the Parliament buildings, while in Toronto there was an Iranian regime flag in the streets, and people have defaced a Jewish-owned business. Not every hater trying to intimidate Jewish business. Toronto was wearing a brown shirt like the members of Hitler's Sturmabteilung, I don't know how to pronounce it, I don't speak German, did in Germany. But some of the action Saturday looked similar to members of the brown shirts. One notable difference is a lot of these anti-Semites wore masks as they scrawled graffiti and placed anti-Israel stickers on the window of the Aroma Espresso bar, which has Jewish roots. So who responds with unthinking rhetoric like a robot? Since you repeated all the talking points of the radical leftists Hamas-sympathizing Jew haters turning Canada into something resembles 1930s Germany. That would be you, I said to this fellow. According to the information I found, Hamas has violated or backed out of several ceasefire deals since the start of the Israeli-Hamas war on October 7, 2023. Here are some examples. October the 15th, 2023. Israel accepted a ceasefire initiated by Egypt and supported by most of the international community, including the Arab League. However, Hamas fired more than 50 rockets in Israel communities soon after the ceasefire began. October the 17th, 2023. Israel agreed to a 5-hour humanitarian ceasefire requested by the UN. The terrorist organization rejected it and fired rockets, including at the city of Beersheba. October 20th, 2023. Israel approved a 2-hour medical humanitarian window in the area of Shayaya, following an International Committee of the Red Cross request. 40 minutes after the ceasefire began, Hamas violated it. October the 26th to 27th, 2023, Israel respected a UN-requested humanitarian ceasefire from 800 hours to 2000 hours on Saturday, October 26th. Israel announced its readiness to prolong the ceasefire until midnight, but a few minutes after 2000 hours, Hamas renewed firing rockets at Israeli civilians. On the same day, Hamas announced a 24-hour humanitarian ceasefire, yet at 1400 hours, Hamas violated its own ceasefire in a short time later. These are just some of the instances where Hamas has breached or reneged on ceasefire agreements. The UN and other international actors have repeatedly called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, stating that keeping an entire population besieged and denied access to amenities is unacceptable. However, both Israel and Hamas have rebuffed increasing international pressure for a ceasefire. And Israel did so for this reason. Israel says Hamas must release the hostages first. Hamas says it will not free them or stop fighting while the Gaza is under assault. Gaza is only under assault because Hamas has attacked Israel. And I provide all the links to the facts that I just shared here. I provide the links so that you can see for yourself. I never asked anyone to believe me. So this ended my interlocution with Neil A. Kirkpatrick on the Canadian Freedom Coalition. My summating thoughts. No number of sheer facts nor any amount of reasoned discourse will ever persuade the ideologically possessed that they have arrived at conclusions based purely upon fantasia, emotion, and unreason. Or worse, that they conclude what they do because they are the victims of successful psychological warfare. So if you're wondering why we are faced with unending, unsolvable crisis after crisis, if you are curious as to why we are confronted by enemies who seek to extinguish the very light of Western culture and the Christian ideals which make it possible, if you conjecture as to why our very existence is in peril, there is but one reason for your quandary. We no longer know who we are, and therefore are foolish enough to believe what those who are robbing us of sight tell us. As a result, we are beset and besotted with self-doubt. In our doubt, we are forced to conclude that it must be us who are wrong. After all, the great and good have proclaimed our collective guilt based purely upon our immutable traits. Instead of being proud of our inherited birthright, we no longer have the conviction to fight and wage war against evil. It is our universities that have inflicted this self-doubt and unreason. Its lecture halls have disseminated delirium mania, and hallucinatory ideation upon its students. Our freedoms will continue to be eroded as we fast approach a time when the societal demands for conformity will create an open-air gulag where our family members, neighbors, and friends will demand that we keep silent and stop pointing out that they are living in simulacra leading to mass hysteria. I know. Our own kids no longer speak with us for this very reason. And many of my chums from the Roots music scene would cross the street rather than pass me by on the sidewalk, where they would be forced to give me the time of day. From the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 40, King James Version. This explains their blindness. He hath blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, and they should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, and be converted, and I should heal them. Yet my prayer is from Luke 40, from Luke 4, verse 18, again from the King James Version. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. Christ is the only one who is going to help you look for the eyes that they have stolen. These pathological liars whose lies you have believed. If these aren't things to think and pray about on this November the 7th, 2023, I don't know what is. I wake in the middle of the night and cry out for God to enlighten this world and to break this delusion. Amen and amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful afternoon.